Okay, I think that we are all here. Am I missing anybody?
I don't see Daphne. Oh, there she is. Okay, I see her. Sorry, she was
Okay.
over there.
I know I'm on my phone. I'm trying to flip through my screens and make sure we are all actually here, but I think we are. And it is 6:30, so we will go ahead and get started. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Chrysler.
Here.
Mr. Hairston.
Here.
Ms. Mooring.
Here.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Here. If you can all please stand and join with us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I did not say, welcome to the November 19th regular Board of Education meeting. I don't know why, but days feel like years, and it feels like it has been years since we've been together for a regular board meeting. Is there a motion to approve minutes from, I'm going to read through several dates, October 3rd special board meeting, October 5th special board meeting, October 7th, 8th, 9th, and 11th special board meetings, October 13th, Finance and Facility Committee meeting, October 15th, regular Board of Education meeting, October 18th and 27th, special board meetings, and October 29th, Policy and Governance Committee meeting.
I'll move.
Mr. Campbell, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hairston, any changes to those minutes at all? Any corrections that need to be made or additional discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes.
Mr. Hairston.
Yes.
Ms. Mooring.
Yes.
Okay, we are on the school and community reports and presentations section of the agenda. I think I see you on here tonight, Mr. Raymond, who is our high school student council president. I will turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again. You are right about that. It does feel like it's been a while since we've had one of these. I just want to say hello. I don't have as much as I usually do today, just because a lot of things are in movement this month. It's a catalyst for a lot of things we have going on at GLHS, and sorry for my lack of tie. I had to rush home from the studio today, and it does still take me a few tries to get it on. This month, there are a lot of initiatives we want to consider having at GLHS in the winter and spring. NHS President Kayla Ferris and I are working to become more dynamic with each other this year and move our school closer towards that idea of one pride, one family, as we say a lot. Student councils, we're working on dynamic ways to still hold Gehannathon, as it's one of our, if not our most important event, raising money for people that are afflicted with pediatric cancer, whether that means changing the format of the event or pushing it back to the spring and trying to do all that crazy stuff like prom and lunch on the lawn and just all that in the spring. But we're going to make it happen. We're going to still find a way to be there for the kids. And with the winter comes holiday times, especially in this year. I think Christmas spirit or whatever holiday spirit in general is going to be so very important in getting people to push through to the end of this year, because it's been a long time since January. We've had a long 12 months and we're almost there. We're almost through it, and we got through it together. I really plan on working with music teachers and our school's administration in general to look at the logistics of holding holiday events and performances for our performing programs. It's near the end of November, and a lot of performing art kids have had to watch athletic programs again and again, get to do what they love since school has started. And that has to happen for people in these other programs as well. And we need to move towards inclusivity for kids across all walks, whether they're an athlete or not. We're also planning to create holiday highlights. That's something NHS is working on, to plan Linking Live to celebrate all walks of culture. We are very, unfortunately, Christmas heavy. That's just the way things roll out. But we want to find a way to uplift other voices and other cultures during this winter. And also in the winter, there's a lot of stuff we want to do in the winter. Also this winter, our bathrooms seem to be a safe space and a space of trauma sometimes for a lot of students. And Student Council is going to attempt to beautify these bathrooms, as we're calling it, our bathroom beautification project, creating positive messages and lining these spaces up for students across the district. So if we just haven't done before, but place a safe haven for students, especially if the way COVID is going on in Ohio. It is so important that the time we're in school, students feel that it is their space and they can feel like they can find a release there. They can do the things they need to do to get through their day and this year in general. In December, we also plan on launching our You Are Not Alone campaign, a mental health awareness website for students to share stories and find mental health resources. We did start this initiative last year, and it just helps it being through the website just because of COVID and everything, that we're kind of at its mercy. We're all under, that's, we all have bosses, but really COVID has been our boss throughout this year. And we also have another campaign another student is working on, and Student Council to launch, for diversity and inclusivity across our district, across our school, across our hallways. And really, that diversity and inclusivity starts from the top. We're going to have to make it a priority in our lessons, our curriculum, and the way we speak to each other, the voices we uplift, the people who lead us. And every day, even if it's the smallest and something that seems insignificant, we have to take a step towards diversity and inclusivity towards us, because we are such a diverse district. We don't have a choice. It's our duty to take even the smallest steps towards that. Hopefully they're bigger strides, but every day we do need to be taking a step, whether that's putting a book in the classroom or having a conversation or creating that safe space. If we make that small step every day, maybe one day, maybe it'll be before I graduate, maybe long after I graduate and I'm out of here, it's going to be a safe space for all students across all walks, and everybody's going to feel welcome at Gahanna Lincoln. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you for having me on here again. I do enjoy it, and hopefully I have results for you in December of what all this has entailed.
Thanks, Jason. I'm curious, do you know, what is Ohio State doing with Buckeye-thon this year? Do you know?
Ohio State is they're doing a virtual campaign, virtual dance on, and they just have a lot more resources than like we do. And yeah, they have the money to do that and do those things, and we are replicating them. And things like the Week of Miracles that they do and Dine to Donates, and still raising money through Team Raiser with them. Our event just won't look the same.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I know I had gotten at least one email from them, but I hadn't had a chance to follow to see what they were doing. I mean, I think it's great that you're still able to do something. I think that's wonderful. The one other thing that I was going to say, I know what I was going to say. There were a few of us that toured a couple of the buildings this week, and we were able to see, I think, was it Jill, was it performing art? Was it
was
show choir?
Yeah, chorale.
Yes. Yeah. We got to see a little tiny snippet. I mean, it looks like they are still performing and still
Mhm.
still ready to go, which is exciting. So hopefully there will be a way to work out those performances. Does anybody have any questions for Jason before we move on in the agenda? Okay. Jason, you know that you're more than welcome to stay with us, and you're also more than welcome to leave whenever you need to. The only thing I guess I would ask is if you're not, I think everybody is muted, but anyone who's not speaking, if you could just keep the mute on, but you're more than welcome to stay here with us for the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, next we have Gehanna Jefferson Education Foundation, and I think I saw Sharon Tomko on the Zoom.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for having me. Just on a personal note, before I give my report, I want to congratulate everyone seated in this Zoom call for an apparent win on the levy. I can't tell you how excited I am. I moved to this community 29 years ago, and 29 years ago we were talking about a new high school. It's not happening for my children, are long gone, but maybe for those grandchildren I dream about, they'll get to go to a new high school. So congratulations on a job well done. I couldn't be more thrilled for all of you. So I have a very brief report. We just completed our fall mini grant cycle. It was a little later than normal just because of when in-person classes started. We delayed the mini grant cycle. And unfortunately, our numbers of mini grant requests that we got are down this year. We awarded 23 out of the 25 grant requests that we got. And the 2 that we didn't award, we're pretty confident that we can get those awarded through other channels. They just didn't fit the parameters that our mini grants have. Trish and I always evaluate after each grant cycle. What do we think happened? You know, why do we think the grant requests were so low? And we think it had to do with earlier in the fall, we collaborated with Neighborhood Bridges to help the staff with their hybrid and distance learning. So we think some of those would have been mini grant requests, but we filled them through the collaboration with Neighborhood Bridges. And also a lot of the mini grants that we fund support functional experiences for our students with special needs. For instance, we provide funds so that the teachers can take small groups out to the grocery stores so those students can practice on, you know, getting items for a recipe and practice paying for those things. Well, we support those, we give funds so the teachers can do that. And those experiences just aren't available for the teachers to do with those students. So that's why, unfortunately, we think our grant requests are down. So we also just received $1,000 from NetJets to help us with that, to continue the Civil Air Patrol, putting new science teachers in the Civil Air Patrol. If you remember a couple years ago, the foundation paid for all the science teachers in the district to be a member of the Civil Air Patrol. And what that membership does is it gets them access to STEM kits for free. And it's a one-time payment and they get it for a lifetime. And so we were real concerned about new teachers in the district, and we approached NetJets and they graciously donated $1,000 so this can continue for new staff. Last month we participated in 2, we call them awareness events. Tricia and I were at the Great Goblin Trail. I don't know if any of you drove through there, but it was a pretty wild scene and it was a lot of fun for our kids in the district. We organized 25,000 pieces of candy. And not that we're really into giving out Halloween candy, but it gave us a great opportunity to pass along information about the Education Foundation and to talk to people. And that's why we wanted to be visible there. We also had another event, our Monster Dash. It was a virtual 5K. Again, we're not in the business of holding a 5K race, but what it was about is being visible and getting our information out there to different audiences. That's about all I have, except please mark your calendars. We are in full steam ahead as far as planning this virtual gala. It is February 27th, 2021, and we've just chosen our theme is going to be spring break because we figure everyone needs a little sunshine in their life about now. So that's all I have. Thanks again and congratulations. If anybody has any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Sharon, I just want to say thank you right back to you because I know that I think you said 29 years you've been in the district. I know that you have contributed many hours that led to us being able to finally successfully make this levy a success. So thank you to you as well.
Thanks.
If nobody has any questions, we're going to move on to the Gahanna Jefferson Education Association. And I think I saw Jenny Palguda in our Zoom. Yes.
Yeah.
Mrs. Palguda, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Well, as you all know, it's been a rough month, but all of GJA, as well as everybody on this Zoom call, as Sharon has already said, is very excited and relieved that the levy and bond did pass. We are ready to, move forward with a new high school. I'm like Sharon, my daughters are not going to, be a part of the new high school, but we're so glad after all these years that is a possibility for those of us that have been in this district for a long, long time. There was a tremendous amount of pain and sadness, as you know, that we felt as members. And as our members made the very difficult decision last month to go on strike. We felt such tremendous support from our students and the community, and we want to thank all of them from the bottom of our hearts for coming out and standing with us and bringing food to the line. There were so many donations. We have been able to help support many of our members who, chose to lose their salary, and we've been able to take care of many needy families, which I appreciate. With all of that being said, we are glad that our contract is settled. We are glad to be back with our students. Obviously, the numbers in Franklin County are very scary. So we hope we can, continue on a good path of education, no matter what that choice is for families. But so far, having the students back in the classroom has been very exciting for us. So thank you all for your time.
Anybody have any questions for Mrs. Palguda? Okay, I'll say that I don't think I said it to Sharon, but to Sharon and Jenny, you are both more than welcome to stay in the Zoom with us. You're also more than welcome to leave, so don't feel like you have to be obligated one way or another. Next, we've got Finance Committee, Mrs. Mooring.
Good evening. We did have a Finance Facilities Committee meeting on Tuesday, November 17th. There were 4 items on the agenda. As always, we discussed the October financials that we will be voting on this evening. We did get an update on a bus purchase grant that Mr. Berlingo brought to our attention in October, and that allowed us to receive $26,400 in a grant funds if we place the order by the end of October of a purchase price of about $82,000. So that's a good opportunity for the district. Number 3, we had a conversation about what items and how they appear on the board agenda based on the purchasing limit in our policy. And lastly, we had a discussion about our November submission of the 5-year forecast to the Ohio Department of Education. And of course, because the certification didn't take place until yesterday, and our meeting was on Tuesday, we reviewed both a 5-year forecast that showed the levy not passing and one that showed the levy passing. And the latter will be what we are voting on this evening. And I think that is the summary of our Finance Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, do you have an update from Policy and Governance Committee?
Yes, we met on October 29th, and I want to thank all of you who joined me in that effort of fine comb reviewing the different policies. They are listed on page 15 of the agenda, those that are being passed. Those that we opted to table for future, none of those are listed on this agenda on page 15. Those we will be reviewing probably at some late date in January, depending on what the calendar is for next year. Once the organizational meeting is done. So thank you to everybody. It's always a great effort working together and going through word by word and line by line with all of you. So yeah, we're moving on and making great progress in getting these lined up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Campbell. Mrs. Chrysler, do you have an update from the COVID-19 Community Task Force Committee?
I do, thank you. First, I'd like to just remind everybody that we do have 2 COVID related things that are happening. The first is the board created a temporary COVID committee that will replace the Student Learning and Achievement Committee. So if you weren't aware of that, I just want to make sure that we're reiterating that information. And so those meetings, what we've done is we've reserved the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of each month beginning in December, with the 4th Wednesday always being a meeting date. So we should always plan for that. And then the 2nd Wednesday will be as needed, as we've seen guidance is continuing to change on a regular basis and maybe a more rapid basis than what we've experienced throughout the summer and into fall. And so I think that it's likely that we will need that 2nd Wednesday as much as possible. I will note specifically that because of the way that the holiday falls this month, that's why we're starting in December, and we will be having our first committee meeting on December 9th. We encourage as many people from the public to attend. The goal with these committee meetings is to be very deliberative, thoughtful, informed when making pandemic planning decisions for our school district, and doing it in a way that is in a public forum that's very transparent so that people can be a part of understanding what goes into those decision-making decision-making factors, and then ultimately the decisions that the district chooses moving forward. In addition to that, we did create also a task force, a community task force. And the purpose of that task force is to review district data, discuss COVID-19 practices and protocols, and provide feedback and recommendations for our district's pandemic plans moving forward. They meet on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays, and we really decided, they met for the first time on November 11th, and it was really an opportunity to go over some expectations for the group. We wanted the group to be able to share openly and respectfully, consider ideas and topics from multiple perspectives. We want to keep safety and maximizing the student learning experience at the forefront of our discussions and recommendations. And we also wanted balanced representation. So we don't want too large of a group that it would preclude us from having meaningful discussions, because I think that can happen as a group gets too large, but big enough that we had representation from a diverse group of medical and health professionals. So far, we do have representation from Franklin County Health. We have a pediatrician, we have representation from mental health, high-risk medical conditions, and also something that I think is very interesting is, and not that the others aren't, but pharmacology. So as we talk about vaccines and vaccine rollouts, just understanding the perspective of a professional pharmacologist will help us really understand what the impact might be on our district and add some interesting and diverse perspective to these discussions. As I stated previously, our first meeting was on November 11th. In that meeting, we reviewed our CATS data, which is the partnership that the district has with Ohio State University that provides specific data to the Gahanna Jefferson School District and Gahanna area community. We reviewed Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools specific data on the number of positive cases and quarantines. And we also took a look at fill rates for absentees. And so that's something that I think a lot of people don't think about. You know, we talk about, you know, PPE, and we talk about, you know, hybrid and number of kids in classrooms and things like that. But we don't really think about the fact that number one, absenteeism for students who are quarantined, and what does that learning experience look like for them over a 2-week period of time? And then number two, absenteeism for our staff and the fill rate for that. And if we struggle, and if we're overloaded with absenteeism based on the pandemic, and we struggle to get those positions filled, that doesn't necessarily translate to positive experiences and maximizing learning and education for our students either. Something else that's interesting is that we looked at some decision trees that other districts are proposing. And if you recall, we proposed a decision tree very early on when the state first issued the different, and I think it was modified. There was 2 different decision trees where we looked at the color code system and what that would mean. You know, the challenge with that is that clearly it's outdated now, because the recommendations that decision tree was based on are no longer necessarily valid, right, at both a county level and a state level. So it's very, very difficult to, what we determined is that it's very, very difficult to develop a decision tree based on the fact that the data is continuing to change on a regular basis. And we're seeing that even just most recently over the past week. However, we do think that it's important to develop some sort of decision tree. And so I think that's something that we will see coming to the board committee, probably not on our meeting in December, which is December 9th. But I expect that will be something in the coming months, which I think will help us too as we transition into 2021 with this virus, and we try to figure out how it is that we, you know, go from hybrid to distance to hybrid to full-time, right? And what those factors are. I do issue a caution though, because I think any decision matrix or decision tree that we come up with, just like in every other district, it's going to be subject to change based on the information that we're provided from outside sources, and specifically the CDC and local health department guidance. Another thing that we talked about as well is communication. And it feels like oftentimes, you know, when we gather enough information to be able to communicate with the public, we either send it out or we're ready to send it out, and then the information changes. And so it's very, very difficult to stay ahead of that. We had some really good feedback from some of the members on our website, and maybe some of the information that was difficult to find, difficult to understand. And so we are committed to launching a microsite that is specifically related to COVID with respect to the district. I think that, sorry, I'm just going to pull this up here real quick. The purpose of that is that we will be able to have a place where people can go, where all the information is bookmarked easily and accessed. This will include FAQs, calendars, COVID dashboard, even tech tips for families, updates from the superintendent. And there can be information as well on individual school pages that would be helpful to get people back and forth to that microsite for easy access. So that's something that we think is very important. We are going to start that work November 23rd. And then right now we're planning to launch that project on January 2nd. So I think the timing is going to be good, because we'll be entering the 2021 season, and we will be in the middle of winter, and there'll be lots of things that are happening and going on with respect to the pandemic. And I think the timing will enable our parents, our students, our teachers to have a robust resource for them that they can go to easily and find information, at least, and I say this, as much information as we can possibly have, given the changing nature of this virus and how it's impacting people on a regular basis. So that was a lot. I hope that I hope that if you have any questions, I can certainly answer them now. I hope anybody that's listening, and any of you obviously, can attend the first board committee meeting on December the 9th. Oh, and I guess, I'm sorry, one more thing. Our COVID task force actually did meet a second time. We met yesterday. And although that wasn't according to our normal schedule, we did that because of the Thanksgiving holiday. And we toured 3 facilities, Chapel Field, West, and the high school. And what they really wanted to understand was the measures and the precautions that the school district is taking and the work that's been done between the administration and the staff in order to provide adequate protection. And so Mrs. Elliott was able to provide them with a document, and I'm drawing a blank on the official name of that document, but basically the district's, PPE and safety protocol and plan. And they went through it with a fine tooth comb, and they had comments and questions. I think one member had, it looked like 27 questions, but I think it was like 15, and they were all good. And really they marked things up, they edited. And so it was good to have that professional expertise taking a look at that document and making those recommendations. We issued a survey to them after the tour, and we're getting feedback from them to see if they have any suggestions on whether it's positive feedback about what we're doing well that reinforces some of our strategies, or what we can do better. And so we can continue to learn from that. So it really is a very holistic approach at, what the district's doing with respect to the virus. I think that we're going to be able to report all of this out in a very, very comprehensive way to the community at these committee meetings. And obviously I'll be able to give a board update at our general board meetings as well. But I'm really happy with the direction that we're going, and I can answer any questions that anybody might have. And Mrs. Elliott, if I've missed anything, Mr. Barrett, please feel free to jump in.
I think you covered it very well, Jennifer. Thank you.
Any board members have questions or comments, I should say, about each of the 3 committees, because I don't think I asked. Any questions or comments about finance and facilities, policy and governance, or the COVID-19 Community Task Force Committee? Okay. We are moving on to public participation. I think I have 4 tonight, maybe 5. I can't scan and count. And they are all submitted via, none of these are video uploads or audio uploads. They are all text uploads. So I apologize. As usual, you're going to have to listen to me read for a little while. The first public participation statement is from Sam Jaffe. It's Jaffee. The topic to be addressed is COVID plan. Topic comments. It seems every day more and more teachers and students in Gahanna are being quarantined because they either contracted COVID or were in close contact with someone who had it. Buildings in our district are not getting enough subs to fill in for all the daily teacher absences and are now being forced to use specialists like intervention specialists, guidance counselors, reading teachers, and EL teachers to cover general education classes. This is not sustainable. In the end, the students that will get hurt most by this policy of using specialists as substitute teachers are the students that need the most help. With more and more districts in Central Ohio going all online until at least January, mostly due to staffing shortages, I hope that Gahanna does not bury its head in the sand and try to move forward with the hybrid plan. We have already had an awful situation occur when the district did not follow the lead of the other districts in the area, and there is no need for another one. I also fear that if Gahanna continues to push forward with in-person schooling while other districts go online, that it will be seen as a method of punishing the teachers for the strike by forcing them to work in an unsafe environment. I should have said at the beginning, for anyone who hasn't watched a board meeting before, public participation is really, it is for the community. So it is available for anyone to submit public comments. It's a one-way communication, though. It's your opportunity to address the board. There is often follow-up that happens from administration staff to people who submit public participation but that follow-up will happen after the meeting. So I'm just going to continue reading through these public participation statements. The second one is from Allison Skaggs, Skaggs. The topic to be addressed is distance learning. Topic comments. A great many distance learning parents who have only chosen distance because we feel it is the only safe option for our children and families feel as if our children have been left behind. 28 plus students per class being bounced around from one school's teacher to another's, all while the schools continue to register more and more positive COVID cases among students and staff. Surely there must be an end in sight now that Franklin County is purple. Children are being sent home to quarantine for 10 days at a time for so much as a runny nose, which they should be. But why pour all of our resources into hybrid at all then as we enter this season of ubiquitous colds and fevers, COVID notwithstanding? Please consider the total inequity in this scenario and stop punishing our children for the fact that this was bungled from the beginning by not placing hybrid and distance students in classes with their own teachers before the switch. The next public participation statement is from Samantha Bennett. The topic to be addressed is purple status and the community. The topic comments are, with the county going to a purple status, we urge the school district to consider switching the district to virtual learning for the holiday season. We know even with this emergency level of a pandemic, there will be GJPS families still planning to gather for the holidays. These holiday gatherings will accelerate the rate of community infection of coronavirus. While we understand every individual family has the right to switch to a different learning model, that is not an answer for the immediate need of the community to pull back and protect its neighbors. The health of our neighborhood will be directly affected by our district's next actions during this critical phase. We are at a crossroads which requires every person, every household, and every neighbor to come together with the common goal of preventing the spread of this infectious disease. Again, I emphasize that the school district's decisions during this holiday season will ultimately affect our community's health and how we contribute to our community's emergency level of disease spread. The next statement is from Brian Benson. The topic to be addressed is COVID plan. And then the topic comments are, the uncontrolled and precipitous rise of COVID cases in Ohio, in central Ohio, and within our schools necessitates our board to take action. I realize it is unpopular and controversial, but we have to be prudent. The greater concentration of COVID in the community, the greater the chance that COVID is exchanged within our schools. Opponents argue that kids remain dubious transmitters of the virus, but they fail to address the outsized impact on parents, caregivers, teachers, and administrators. The steps required to abate the viral spread must be impactful, and I'm sad to say, save the segment of the population that needs to be saved from itself. Far too many parents feel COVID is overblown or that there is a benefit to exposing greater numbers to the disease. I have no doubt that some send their kids to school without first checking for symptoms, without quarantining, even though they know that there was contact with an infected person. This must be done. We cannot procrastinate and get to the point where we are forced to act because our system is failing. The last public participation statement is from Brian Blau. It's Bleau. The topic to be addressed is Matthew Campbell. Topic comments. As many have now seen Mr. Campbell's racist, sexist, and science-denying posts, I'd like to say that I'm appalled that this man has any sort of say in my children's lives. If he chooses not to resign, is there any sort of action the board or community can take to mitigate the extent his beliefs may harm our children, i.e. censure, removal from committees? That is the last public participation statement that I have. Let's see, we're on page 3 right now. Communication and adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, changes to the agenda at all from anyone? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Daphne?
Mrs. Mooring, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Campbell, any discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston.
Yes.
Okay, we are on to the superintendent's report. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you. It was great seeing the first week we were back, seeing our teachers back, seeing kids in school. The comments that teachers made were amazing. You know, seeing kids just walk into school, get off the bus. We hadn't seen it in so long, and it was just very moving to all of us. And so Jill and I went to all the schools, and you know, we were again in the buildings yesterday with the COVID task force, and seeing the job our teachers and principals and support staff, custodians are doing to make things safe, to make learning rich. It's been just a very gratifying experience. And as we watch the numbers grow, it becomes just really paramount that we look at things, all the data that we need to look at as we make a decision beyond next Tuesday. So a letter just went out to parents, and we will stay in our hybrid plan until Tuesday, the 24th. In tomorrow, we will send out a communication as we analyze the following data. We're going to decide what to do the 30th and beyond. And so the data we're going to look at in a very deliberate and thorough way, and we have been looking at this data for a number of days now, is public health guidance, current positive cases in our district, staffing levels, substitute teacher availability, substitute aid availability, quarantine numbers of students and staff, the quality of instruction, giving our staffing challenges, and student and staff safety. We'll also make a determination about athletics. What's been interesting, and I think Jennifer covered it really well, is things change moment to moment. So all along, purple has been a designation where everyone thought schools would go automatically remote. And so far, Franklin County Public Health and Columbus Public Health, their suggestion is that schools stay in their current learning modality. They sent out an advisory that was a joint advisory, which means schools could stay in hybrid. I think what's challenging a lot of us, a lot of superintendents and administrators, is the absences due to staff and student quarantine are making it difficult to process and start each day and make learning meaningful. So we're going to look at that data tonight, tomorrow, and we're going to make a decision for the 30th and beyond. One of the things that we continue to see is large quarantine numbers. We have over 400 students in quarantine right now, and our teachers are working really hard to serve those students. But obviously, if they're at home for 14 days, that is a challenge, making sure that they get their education. And so we're going to look at those numbers. It's also really, really important for us to look at the fact that we're purple. That is a challenge, even though Franklin County Public Health is saying they're not seeing a lot of spread in schools. There's very little evidence of transmission in schools. What's causing many schools to go to remote learning is staffing. And a couple of the public statements tonight, parents mentioned that. We want our teachers to be safe. We want our staff to be safe. We want our students to be safe, and we want rich learning to take place. And so that's our challenge. And there's a lot of constraints that we face. So our commitment is to put out a statement tomorrow after we analyze the data. We didn't think it was appropriate when the county went purple today to make a knee-jerk decision. We want to make a measured decision and have a plan in place. And so that's what we plan to do tomorrow. We'll also make a determination about athletics. The recommendation in the joint advisory was to suspend athletics. A number of districts are doing a phase one approach where students are in pods. We're going to look at all of our options. It's really a difficult and challenging time for teachers, for principals, for all of us. And we really appreciate the fact that, everyone in our community has been through a great deal through this pandemic. And we were all hoping to be able to stay in hybrid. I know our teachers found so much joy in seeing kids in their classrooms. We're all hoping to stay in hybrid for as long as we can. We have some things to look at, and we'll make a determination tomorrow. I also want to, I'm going to turn it over to Jill Elliott for a couple of items. But I want to, before I do that, I just want to thank our levy committee and our community for all the work that went into passage of issue 22. It was amazing that almost 29,000 people came out to vote. The numbers were as high as I think they've ever been in our county in terms of the number of people who voted. And we're really happy that we gained some votes in after Tuesday night when they counted the remaining ballots, the mail-in ballots, and they looked at provisional ballots. So I want to thank our committee specifically. So Sarah Narlock, parent in our district, another parent, Catherine Hope Cunningham, worked on our levy very, very hard as well. Karen Wester and Kate Mazurek were both levy chairs, and board members Daphne Mooring and Burl Piccolantonio were at every levy meeting helping us strategize and plan. And this committee was one of the strongest I've ever worked with. I think we canvassed close to 15,000 homes. Teachers and staff helped with that canvassing. It was pretty much a digital campaign. We had parents making videos. So Sandip Patel and so many people in the community stepped up and supported this thing, given all the turmoil we had been through. It's really an amazing result. And we're excited to begin work with looking at hiring an architect and going through the bidding process for that and starting the planning. We hope to have the planning done by the spring, say June of 22, and begin work and complete these projects in the bond by the 24-25 school year. That's our ambitious goal. And I also wanted to thank Beth Boy, a former parent of students in the district. She is the one that gave us the walking list when we did our literature drops, and she's phenomenal at that. And so I wanted to thank her as well. I'd like to turn this over to Jill Elliott. As part of our contract settlement with teachers, we have a COVID concern committee that's been meeting every Thursday, and Jill wanted to kind of review the items they've been talking about. And then also she wanted to review the work of our equity task force. So Jill, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as Steve mentioned, we did implement a COVID concern committee with our GJEA members and have been meeting weekly. Jenny's on that every week with me. We have met 4 times, I believe, and the group is made up of 12 GJEA members and 3 administrators that kind of rotate out depending on the concerns that come to the group each week. We discuss questions that come up. We try to provide, solutions and clarification. Some of the common themes over the first few weeks have been just getting a better handle and understanding on the contact tracing process, what happens when staff or students, or, we talked a lot today about even when family members at home are positive, or when quarantines are in place, kind of what are the next steps for that. We revisit the cleaning processes. We've talked about that a couple weeks, as well as just face covering, enforcement. And then things like class sizes. We know that some of our class sizes, especially in our distance learning models, are very high, as well as we've talked about this evening, subcoverage, and just kind of the implications on the teacher's workload, the implications on the educational experience for students. I would say, all of the things that have come up, we've been able to, address, clarify. There's been a few things we've had to, circle back to the next week, but it's a great group of teachers and administrators, and I think it's been very successful thus far. I also, as Steve said, wanted to update you all on our equity team and the work that we've been doing. I think I shared previously at one point that we had a group of administrators last fall that joined an equity institute through the Educational Service Center. And after working through those sessions, we felt like it was really important to expand our group. So it grew by 5 additional administrators. So now there are 10. That equity team has been meeting, over the summer and through the beginning months of the school year, and really started taking a deep dive into some of our data. And to be quite honest, it's very alarming. And so just kind of discussing some of the next steps, we had a chance recently we did as an equity team first, but we had an opportunity to dig really deeply into the board's resolution, reaffirming the commitments of the board, and really dissect it and take a look at, each part of that resolution and what it means. And we really see it as a call to action, and we're appreciative of that call to action. And so, we had a chance to do that with a full administrative team. And then just last week, our administrators have now started to take a look at that resolution more deeply with building staffs. I think 4 of our staffs have had a chance so far at staff meetings to take a look at that. And over the next several weeks, the rest of our buildings will be able to take a look at that as well. We also are sharing the data next with staff, so that staff can start to see that data and how it connects to the call to action from the board. And then from there, we as a team have identified 3 areas that, we will be forming action teams and expanding our teams to our teaching staff, our support staff in the district, as well as students and parents in the community. So, it's kind of been a gradual build out. We will be, taking a look at staffing, certainly recruitment and retention of staffing, also taking a look at some of our disproportionality data, and also taking a look at the curriculum. And Jason, referenced that in his speech this morning, but also taking a look at not only diversifying our resources, but also reframing and redesigning instruction through the social justice lens, and the culturally relevant lens. And so there's more to come, and we'll certainly share data with you all, at a board meeting as well. But just wanted to update you all on the movement we've been making with our equity team and our plans to, expand it. It's very important work to us, and I know I got some feedback this week from some of the administrators that had gone through the resolution with their teachers, and just a lot of really great dialogue, questioning, wondering, a lot of enthusiasm to see that data and start to get some action plans in place. So wanted to give that update. And then lastly, Steve referenced a little bit in the beginning with our visits to the school, but this pandemic has really taken a toll on everyone. And We know that, you know, our families at home are dealing with a lot, our students are dealing with a lot. We wanted to really take an opportunity to share how thankful we are for our staff. Literally, mountains are moved every single day to provide as strong of an educational experience as we can for our students. Our teachers are, you know, doing amazing things, picking up extra workloads to fill in where we have openings, you know, managing multiple students in various situations on top of just, you know, the newness of the world they're living in. And so our substitutes have been great, our aides, our bus drivers, custodians, our central office staff. I mean, it's really remarkable to see what goes on every day in the district during this pandemic to make things work. And so just want to, you know, give a shout out to our staff and, you know, just thank everyone for everything they're doing. And I'm done.
So thanks, Jill. Just kudos to you and your team for all the work you're doing with the Equity Task Force. It was nice to use the board resolution as a springboard for that discussion. I think the curriculum team and principals and all the people working on the Equity Task Force saw that document as a powerful reminder of both the promise and the challenge we have to build equity and access in our district. And so just know that that document is sort of our North Star as we try to create better access and better equity for all of our students. So it was really well led by Jill and our curriculum team, and it was very, very impressive and a very moving conversation. So thank you for that. That concludes our report. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett and Mrs. Elliott. Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, I appreciate hearing the update on the equity work that's been done. I know I keep saying it, but this year feels like it's been forever long. It feels like it was so long ago that we did pass that resolution, but it's good to get an update on where things are in the district and how they're going. Also appreciate the update that went out both by email and the update that Mr. Barrett gave tonight about the learning model for the district as we kind of navigate through another period of time where information is changing really rapidly. Nobody out there wants to watch Burl cry anymore. So I'm gonna try really hard to not do that. But I guess the one thing that or maybe two things that I want to say about it. Number one, I echo Jill's thanks to our staff. And I know that thanks comes from all of us. It was a privilege. Yeah, I can't believe it was yesterday, but yesterday to walk through the buildings and see all of the work that's being done. You know, I've been able to see some of it on the other side of the computer screen, but to be able to go into the buildings and see how hard every single person is working to try to do their very best for kids. I'm just incredibly grateful to all of our staff. I think that all of us know, all of us on the board, all of the staff in the district, we all know that the very best place for our kids in normal circumstances is to be in person in our buildings with our staff and with other students. I don't think there is a person in the district or on this board who doesn't recognize that and appreciate that. And I guess the one last thing that I want to say about it is I don't want this to come across as scolding because I don't mean it in that way at all, but I hope that all of us in the community can recognize how important it is for our kids to have as much of an opportunity as they can this school year to be in person where they belong. And I know that there's so much that is so hard this year, and there is so much that we feel is out of our control. But there are some things that we do have control over, and those things are the decisions that we all make every day. And I know that when I'm making those decisions, what is at the forefront of my mind at every moment is trying to make sure that our kids have the best opportunity that they possibly can to be where they're supposed to be. So that's it for me. Anybody else have any comments or questions about the superintendent and assistant superintendent's report? Okay, we are going to move on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Verlingo.
All right, can everyone see the screen? Okay. All right, so I will briefly cover the October results. We did cover these at the Finance Committee meeting. Basically, when we look at results through the month of October, and I apologize, I don't know if I can make this larger on my screen. Maybe, yes, I can. Okay, so year to date, revenues are running about operating revenues 1.6 million ahead of plan or estimates. Most of that is due to tax settlements and also TIF and abatement revenue that we've received. The one reason tax revenues are running ahead of estimates is that we didn't see the reduction that we anticipated in collections in the first half of the year. On the expense side, we are about 1.1 million under running expenditures estimates. Primarily, about half of that is related to salaries and wages. We will see an increase in the month of November, due to settlements of contracts and back payments and other adjustments that will occur this month. So that will tend to be more normalized at the end of November. Fringe benefits are a bit over due to some payments and settlements that occurred early in the year. Most other adjustments or discrepancies are due to timing. One item to note in non-operating revenue, we did receive about $500,000 refund, and I wouldn't say refund, but the runout reserve for the self-insurance fund still had over $500,000 in it. Those funds were transferred back to the district in the month of October. And, we split that between the self-insurance fund and the general fund based upon the contributions made for those premiums that had occurred in prior years. So it shows up as a prior year refund. In terms of trending, we are, looking at history. We are slightly above in terms of local receipts. That'll tend to normalize a little bit by the end of the year. State revenues are at 18.8. That'll increase to about 20.7 in terms of estimates and forecast. But you will note that over time, going back to 2017, the state revenues as a percentage of total are dropping. So that we are seeing more and more local share contributions towards our funding. In terms of investments, let me go to the summary chart first. We are primarily invested in short-term securities, most of which are related to construction funds for the new Lincoln Elementary. Most of our other investments, some do go out 2, 3, 4 years, and those are still yielding returns well in excess of the current market rates that are being experienced. If we look at some of the investment portfolio on the meter side, we are still seeing quite a few CDs that we have out there in the 2 to 3% range. There's some government bonds still yielding 1.7, 1.9, et cetera, which again, well in excess of what we can earn today on a 2-3 year security. So overall interest earnings, although they will be declining, are not dropping off as quickly as they could have been had we been totally short-term in our investment summary. There are also on the agenda this evening appropriation changes. We will be seeing an increase in general fund appropriations of about 1.3 million. Most of that is related to special ed tuition for placements of students in other programs. We're also seeing an increase in our scholarship deductions for autism and John Peterson scholarships, and additional funds that we are expending for PPE. It seems like the COVID crisis that is ongoing is definitely using up more and more resources. The amount that we had originally planned to use against general fund activity had the virus subsided, we actually needed to use, and we've basically extended most all the money from the state at this point and the federal government related to COVID relief funds. Okay. Any questions on the financial results? Okay, the next thing is the 5-year forecast. Let's see if I can open that. Amazingly, I'm getting this to work. So, okay, so, sorry. I need to switch this so that you can only see the main slide. Slideshow. Okay. So as was noted when Ms. Mooring summarized the activity from the Finance Committee, we did not yet have the certified results of the levy at that time. It has now been certified that we are up 76 votes, and although we are still awaiting the recount, it is much more likely than not that the levy will eventually be certified to pass. So this forecast now incorporates the additional revenues and tax revenues that will be collected over the next several years due to the operating levy passage. As an overview, and we had spoken about this previously several times, House Bill 166 froze our state funding at FY19 levels, and that would have been for fiscal year 20 and 21. But despite that, the cuts did occur. We lost $1,667,000 in FY20 at the end of the fiscal year, and we are also experiencing that same reduction this fiscal year. The good news is that the state results are better than forecasted, so that revenues have increased at the state level, from taxes, sales taxes, et cetera, as the economy has improved once it was opened up. So we are projecting now that the increase in FY22, we expect that reduction of 10% to be reduced to 5%, and then we're expecting full funding for fiscal year 23 to 25. Whether or not the state makes up the amount that they cut from our budgets these last 2 years is debatable, but that could occur also. But again, those are one of those uncertainties that we cannot put in the forecast. Another source of revenue is the casino revenue that schools receive, and that does impact us by about $400,000 over the forecast period. On the local property tax side, tax collections are on par with prior years. As I mentioned, the higher delinquencies we predicted did not really materialize due to the pandemic, although we are projecting a slightly higher uncollectible rate for the first half of 21. As opposed to what normally have been about a 98% collection rate, we're expecting 96. That doesn't necessarily eliminate the revenue, but it defers it because those uncollectible taxes are typically collected in future periods. The passage of the 4.6 mil operating levy adds a half a year of collection of taxes in fiscal year 21, and we will then get a full year of collection in fiscal 22 and thereafter. So in 21 and 22, we see quite a bit of an increase in tax revenue growth when you look at the forecast numbers to be presented, but thereafter we see minimal growth because we don't necessarily receive increases unless there's new construction in the district. On the expenditure side, the impacts of the pandemic are definitely in excess of previous estimates. We assumed in the May forecast that this virus would have been somewhat short-lived and we would have been back in school this year full time. That obviously did not occur, and that's driving up cost. Headcount additions that we've layered in to meet the expected increases in enrollment are also included, and we'll go into a little more detail on what that is. The learning model has directly impacted food service since kids are not at school to order lunches and a la carte items. Right now, the bulk of our funding is strictly federal reimbursements due to the free lunch program that was implemented federally. Like I said, the levy results have been certified. This assumes that it has passed, but we still are operating below our 60-day cash reserve requirement at this time. Some of the drivers that we consider in the forecast: inflation, economic conditions. As the economy improves and prices rise, there's always an increase in cost. The number of programs offered, curriculum offerings definitely is a driver to cost. Facilities are operating cost, repair and maintenance. We currently have some very old facilities that do require a significant amount of repair and maintenance and cost to operate. Certainly when the new high school is constructed, it would be much more efficient, plus the repairs and maintenance would be minimal. So we should see a drop off in operating costs and that type of thing, but that's years away. And then certainly enrollment is one of the biggest drivers, whether it's increasing or decreasing. As you know, we are increasing significantly. Enrollment, we're projected to add 579 students through 2025 forecast period. That's broken out as shown. If we assume about 30 students per class, that alone adds about 19.3 teaching staff, assuming that some of those students would be dispersed throughout other classrooms and not necessarily, because normally we try to target, I would think, Steve, about 25 students or less in a classroom. The head count, we had forecasted well over a year ago when Lincoln was to be constructed, additional elementary staff to handle additional students that would be in a larger building, one admin. I've also layered in 10 additional district staff on the certified side. And typically we see about 8 or so retirements that would be replaced with new staff. So that number is certainly subject to change. I mean, given the pandemic and the environment today, we may see more or less retirements. Not sure how it's going to shake out. On the classified side, we are looking at adding bus drivers for additional students, which means we also need to add probably additional buses and maintenance and custodial staff to handle the additional square footage. So incremental headcount in the November forecast, as you can see, is about 38 total headcount. With the passage of the levy, the blue line represents revenues. So you can see that we are above expenditures in the forecasts through 2023. And in 2024, we would start to see deficit spending again. The breakout of revenue, local sources about 79.3 versus state of 20.7. Real estate taxes and tangible property tax bringing in about 68.6%, or about two-thirds of our revenue from taxes. Foundation and other state revenue about, again, 20.6, 20.7%. The other local is typically made up of fees, interest revenues, those type of things, rent that we collect from the facility over at Clark Hall. So those are usually a fairly small part of our budget. Challenges that we're still facing, we did have the cut, the 1.67 or 3.4 million loss. If the number of COVID cases continue to increase, we're now purple. We could see a stall in the recovery. More restrictions on business could also then result in less tax revenue at the state level, and we could then see maybe potential future cuts. Let's hope that we don't get back to that situation. Our revenues do not necessarily increase with inflation due to the House Bill 920 millage reductions. So inflation and enrollment growth will most always outpace our revenue growth from taxes. Which means that eventually in every school district in the state, the levy cycle basically demands that you will be back on the ballot at some time in the future to cover operating expenses. And certainly if we're not back in school full time, it does have a negative impact on dues and fees, tuition, athletics, etc. So we do see reduced levels of that this year, and unless we get back into school full-time next school year, that will continue to be under what we would have forecasted. Expenditures overall, we are forecasting about 78% of our operating budget for wages and benefits. That's less than what we normally would see of about 80 plus percent, 80 to 81. Most of that is due because we're seeing a large increase in contracted services and supplies related to COVID crisis. So as a percent of the total, it's a bit less. But in the forecast, it does make increase back up to what it normally would be. If you look at a summary by line, revenues and expenditures, you do see with the incremental revenues received in FY21, we then have a positive line 6.01, which is basically our revenues over expenditures. That continues into FY22 and 23 and turning negative in FY24. When we originally planned for this levy earlier this year, it was supposed to be a 4-year levy to carry us through fiscal year 24. And although it's slightly worse due to the incremental expenses we're incurring today and potential impact on state funding, it's still pretty much in line with what we originally forecasted for the millage to be put on the ballot. So our ending day cash balance, if we look at fiscal year 21, we'll end up at 47 days. The red line is cash balance, which is our cash minus not appropriations, but encumbrances. The red line represents our budget reserve and the number of days included in the budget reserve. If you look back to 2018, 19, and 20, the budget was reserve was at 1 million for 18 and 19. We raised it to 2 million in fiscal year 20. That is very small, and that shows you, for example, we had 4 days of operating cash at the $1 million level. In FY21, building it up to 5 million will give us 18 days. So the goal was to build that up over time to 60 days, which by 2025, 59 is what it's showing due to rounding. But the goal is to get us to 60 days operating cash reserve. So when you look ahead to fiscal year 2024, we still have a cash balance of 17.5 million. And even in fiscal 25, we will still have 11.2 million. Taking off encumbrances and the reserves, we would have an unreserved balance in 24 of $774,000. But we do have a shortfall in the cash on hand of 5.6 days. And given that expenses per day for that year are projected at about 308,000, that's about a $1.7 million shortfall. If we were to implement reductions today over the next 3.5 years, that would be about $500,000 a year we would need to reduce. It would be premature, and there's no need to really make any reductions today because there are many factors that are in the forecast and estimates that if any one of those or several change in a positive direction, we would not need to make any reductions. So until the end of this year is known and what the outlook for next year is, there really would be premature to look ahead and try to make any reductions today. And then this is the forecast. Other than that summary line, I know it's very small, but these are all the lines of the forecast. Because if you are approving what I'm presenting, this is the summary forecast that we would submit to the state. So these are the actual numbers that would go to the state.
Mike, can I just interject? If you can go back to that line, I think it's important for the public and our meeting guests to understand. If you look at line 3.04, supplies of materials has increased over $1.1 million in 1 year. Basically, a lot of that is due to COVID. So we are really being negatively affected on the operating side. Similarly with purchase services going from 11.9 million to 14.5. We talked about on Tuesday that a lot of that is attributed to COVID. So you see those numbers going down then in fiscal year 22.
Correct.
But I just think it's important for people to know that our operations are, even though we did receive some state and federal funds for COVID expenses, they're not nearly covering what the costs are to provide education this year.
That is true.
And Mike, I think some of that purchase service increase is an increase in, would that show up in that line item under the scholarship request for special education?
That would be for tuition, yes.
So it would be in there, right? So
Yes.
we have a lot more requests for that.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the bigger increases that we incurred.
That's all I had, Mike.
Okay. Did you want to go back to the reserve schedule? So again, just looking at our cash balances and reserves, the goal to maintain a 60-day reserve is kind of twofold. One, it provides some stability in that it's used as a trigger so that when we forecast that we are dropping below that reserve level, which in this year for fiscal year 2025, that basically says to the administration and the board that we need to take some action. We either need to look to increase revenues or we need to look to reduce expenditures because we are not allowed as a fiscal entity to go negative in our general fund. So by having the 60-day amount that we keep in reserve, it allows us to make better judgments in terms of when we need to take action. The second thing is when we look at bond ratings, we're currently rated AA2. The chance for us going up to AA1, which would be the highest rated, to get the lowest interest rates is probably not possible today, only because of the amount of debt that we do have and then the debt that we're issuing to build the new schools. But the cash reserve policy does have an impact on your bond rating. So for districts that have one, the rating agencies see that as a positive sign. And we are AA2. There is a risk at some point you could be downgraded. We have a lot of positives going in Gahanna in terms of property value growth, new construction. So I don't see that as a risk. But for other districts, it could become one. So certainly you don't want to be downgraded because that increases your interest cost. Any other questions or?
I couldn't tell if that was the end of the 5-year forecast presentation or also the end of, is that the entirety of the treasurer's
Okay, well
report?
that was the forecast.
Okay.
We had two other items, which were the appropriations. I touched on, the increases in general fund. The others are, mostly grant related activities where we had carryovers that will increase both expenditures and receipts. So no impact to the grant totals. And then lastly, there were some donations received that the board would accept.
Mike, I do want to just add, you and I had a conversation about, as we've been thanking people for their extraordinary efforts over the last couple of months, you mentioned the payroll staff and how hard they worked. Do you want to address that?
Well, yes. I have two people in the department who handle payroll. Obviously, we did have planned to have implemented software in the fall. Unfortunately, due to let's say the strike and some other activities, that had to be postponed. So we're now scheduling that for the spring. The work that they've needed to do in terms of retro adjustments to pay, recalculating pay, doc pay, there's just many things. We're dealing with archaic software that isn't necessarily easy to work with, which is one reason we need to upgrade to the newer version of the state software. But I did want to commend them for the work they've done, which I think they've gone above and beyond in order to get these adjustments processed. In the middle of also doing open enrollment for insurance now and trying to ensure that everyone logs in and gets their coverage, because it's sometimes a struggle to get people to do what they need to do in order to maintain their coverage.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Verlingo?
No, I guess I would just say I appreciate the thoroughness in the presentation and all the information that was provided. I think there's a lot of changes going on behind the scenes at a state level, especially because of COVID, that a lot of people may not be aware of. And so I think having that explanation, sorry, there's a small stampede in my house right now. Having that information available and being able to share it, I think is really important. And so I appreciate the thoroughness of the presentation for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would echo the thanks to treasurer staff. I know, I mean, among all of the changes that you talked about, Mr. Verlingo, there was also several contracts that were approved in the midst of all of this that required some additional work on the part of treasurer staff. So thank you to everyone in the treasurer's staff. I think that is one of the offices that is probably least seen by the community, but there's been a lot of work by that staff to try to adjust with all of the things that we've had going on.
And certainly I didn't mean to slight any other members of my staff when I talked about payroll, because in addition to those changes, we're in the midst of our audit, and we're handling that process. We also had a change in staff. I had a resignation in accounts payable, and I have staff members stepping up to do extra work to kind of keep that going until we replace the position. So yeah, it's been a very challenging year, let's say, but certainly in the last month or two, even more so.
Kudos to all of them, Mike. They have been here very late and working very hard. So,
look, Mr. Barrett, you found the hand clap emoji. I don't even know how to do that in Zoom.
It's dangerous that I learned that.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Verlingo before we move on to the items for action under financial business? Okay, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 4? Unless there's an objection, I guess, to taking those 4 items together. Is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 4 under letter C?
So moved.
Mrs. Mooring, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hairston, any additional discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes.
We are on educational pupil programs and services, and there are 4 items for action. Unless there is an objection to taking those items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 4 under letter D?
I'll move.
Mrs. Mooring, is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Chrysler, any discussion about any of these items? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
We are on page 5, letter E, human resources, and there are 31 items for action. Unless there is an objection to taking those items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 31 under letter E?
I'll move.
Mr. Hairston, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Mooring, thank you. Any discussion about any of these items? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Yes. We are now on general business, and there are 8 items for action. Unless there is an objection to taking those items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 8 under letter F?
We have Scott Leopold here from.
I'm going to get the motion on the
Okay.
table first, if that's okay. And then
No, that's fine. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'll move.
Mr. Campbell, is there a second?
I'll second, Mrs. Chrysler.
Thanks, Mrs. Chrysler. So before we discuss any of the other items, Mr. Barrett reminded me that we have Scott Leopold here to talk with us about item number 6 in this list under general business. So let's start with that. We'll let Mr. Leopold explain to us what this item is, and then we will have some additional discussion and conversation about item number 6, and then we can have additional conversation about any of the other items after that. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Barrett and Mr. Leopold.
Thank you. Hello, Scott. So Scott is with us tonight. Scott and his firm, Cooperative Strategies, did our enrollment study, which helped us so much in planning for phase 2 of our master facilities plan. Scott also works at the local and state and national level, helping districts redistrict, and he is an expert in redistricting. And as we complete Lincoln Elementary and we increase its capacity to 750 students, it's important that we begin the redistricting process. So what we've recommended tonight is a contract to work with Cooperative Strategies to redistrict and take some of the STEM, some of the overcrowding at a number of our elementaries, and shift students to Lincoln Elementary. And we want to do it in a way that's equitable and keeping, Scott's going to get into the different options we have and the work he's done. I know most notably, Scott recently has worked in Howard County, Maryland, and there was nationally, the New York Times and LA Times covered the work that he did there in the Howard County schools. And so we're really grateful to have his expertise to help us through this process. So Scott, we'll turn it over to you.
Trying to juggle all my screens here. Welcome to my office / class kindergarten classroom. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for having me tonight. Just to kind of go through a little bit on me. I've been at this for about 15 years, just some recent projects that we've worked on. I've been working with Olentangy local schools since 2005, and we're kicking off another redistricting process there, kind of parallel to yours. Jefferson County Public Schools, this is Louisville, about 100,000 students. We just finished up a dual resides process there where they're looking at creating some new boundaries in West Louisville so that students that live there will have the opportunity to go to a school close to home or a suburban school like they have been zoned to for the last 40 years. And so it's giving them a new choice that they haven't had before. Webster Groves is a school district outside of St. Louis, Missouri. They're kind of like an Upper Arlington or a Bexley, and we've worked with them for several years and took them through a process that had kind of that lens of equity involved in it as well last year. As Steve had mentioned, Howard County Public Schools is a county that we've worked with for quite a while. They're outside of Baltimore. I can talk to that in some more detail if you'd like to hear it later. Marysville, we've done some processes in 2015 and 2019. Fort Bend Independent School District, and this is the Sugar Land area outside of Houston, and we've worked with them since 2013. Just some older projects, Tays Valley Local Schools did a process in 2016. Cleveland Heights, University Heights up outside of Cleveland, we did in 2012. This is just kind of our general process. Again, this is just just an overview. We'll get into much more detail as we develop our project website. We'll make sure that we have everything transparent for everybody to see online. But we'll begin with background data analysis and some preparation. We'll start with some baseline enrollment projections by school. We'll establish some guiding criteria or guidelines that we'll use throughout the process. We'll establish an advisory committee that we can kind of bounce ideas off as we develop options. As we get into the nitty-gritty of developing the options, it'll be early January. We'll have some preliminary boundary options that we'll work with the advisory committee to refine and finalize before we take to the community for feedback. And then in late January, we'll be looking at presenting options first to you as an informational item, and then we'll launch an interactive survey to get feedback from the community. And on the back end of that survey, we'll conduct some supplemental virtual focus groups so that we'll have the opportunity to foster and facilitate communication between community members. We don't want to have a one-sided process. We want to try to get as much conversation going as we can. We'll then bring the responses from the survey and the focus groups back to the committee that will refine and adjust the options based on that feedback, and we'll develop a final recommendation to the superintendent. And so that's kind of our overall high-level process and timeline. Just a couple things I wanted to add here. Community engagement during a pandemic, it may seem like it's impossible, but somehow we've been able to do it. Under normal circumstances, we would vet options through in-person focus groups before we go to the committee for feedback. And then in a community meeting that we would normally have in public, we would have roundtable discussions with community members. What we've been able to do in this pandemic is that before we do anything that we take to the public, we first present it to the board. We wouldn't do that with a focus group first. We would do that later in the process. As we go to the community, what we've had a lot of luck with is we would embed the options in an interactive online survey. So I'm not talking about a survey where you have to watch a YouTube video first. We like to embed individual option snippets throughout the survey. And so there might be a 1 or 2 minute introduction where it talks about the process. And then as you get through the survey, at each option we develop, there's a 1 or 2 minute video that explains the option, the mechanics of it. There's a link that you can go to an address locator to find out if you're impacted by the option. And then you can answer the question to give your level of feedback or any other comments you may have. We find that this is a lot more interactive than just a simple survey. And then at the end of the survey, what we do is we allow the participants to sign up for a supplemental focus group. And so that way, if folks have felt that they've had enough engagement through the survey, they're done. That's it. That's fine. We've got their feedback. But if we have people that want to have additional conversations, we provide that opportunity for a focus group setting that may have 10 to 15 community members in it, and we would facilitate those conversations. And so I think what's nice about this is that by having that application at the end of the survey, we're not wasting people's time by taking them through the content, because they will have already seen all of the information in the survey, and we can have a very meaningful focus group discussion. Typically, we get enough interest where we can kind of break the focus groups up into some distinctly different groups. I think it's good that we can get, like, if we can get a group of students, if we can get a group of parents, if we can get a group of non-parents, and we kind of take them through a battery of prompted questions just to get some feedback, and we can see how those different groups respond to those questions. Just overall, best practices in these types of processes. Kind of the cardinal rule is if we can remove uncertainty, that removes anxiety. And what really gets people amped up is just that anxiety of the unknown. So transparency, transparency, transparency. We want to keep the community as up to date as possible. We will curate a project website that will make sure that we have all of the information as we're creating it uploaded on there for anybody to see. I always find that it's very useful to have an FAQ page, so that if anybody has any questions about the process at any point, they can submit a question to that page, and we'll make sure we get it up there and answered. The other thing that's good is if we can be as clear as possible with any exceptions for implementation. So if we're going to allow rising 5th graders to stay and not be impacted by a move, if there's going to be any provisions for siblings, the sooner that we can confirm or deny that, the less anxiety it will have. And we also like to leverage technology. So Again, I talked about those address locators so that you don't have to try to read a map. You can just type in your address and you're good to go. And also embedding media throughout those online surveys. As far as implementation goes, these are just some examples of what some districts decide to do. Allowing rising 5th graders and 8th graders to finish at their current school is very common. It would just reduce the impact of the reduction of overcrowding or balancing of utilization for a year. Allowing siblings of accepted or exempted students to stay as well. We do see that somewhat often, but that kind of has a lingering effect where, now you've got to track if these students are allowed to stay, for 3 or 4 years, depending on how young the younger sibling is. Allowing all students to finish at their current school, we don't see that very often because it basically slows the impacts from redistricting down to, it could be phased out over 5 or 6 years, depending on what level it's granted at. Providing transportations for students that are allowed to stay. It's pretty normal for small scale state changes, but one of the unintended consequences is that you're going to need additional buses and additional drivers because in those areas you're essentially going to have double routes. So that's another thing to consider. Allowing students to stay at their current school but do not provide transportation. That's something that we do see sometimes, but one of the unintended consequences is that it can have an economic barrier, and only the students that have the means to get to school with parents or some other method would have the ability to participate in that. And so those are just some considerations that we've kind of picked up over the years. Guidelines, I think it's good to have guidelines as we develop options so that we can have a benchmark to kind of measure things against. So these are just common ones that we see as we go through this, and this isn't by any means an all exhaustive list, but promoting student health by maximizing walkability of boundaries. And so that can also be just overall reduction in transportation. Some people will say neighborhood schools. Attempt to create boundaries that reflect the demographics of the district as a whole. Attempt to keep neighborhoods zoned to one school. Attempt to maintain direct feeder patterns. And so what that means is we'd like to have elementary schools that don't split out to 2 or 3 middle schools where all the students from an elementary school go to the same middle school, and then at the high school. Depending on the size and quantity of the middle schools, it may or may not be possible, but it's something that we can look at and strive towards. Attempt to keep transportation times as short as possible. Attempt to keep boundaries contiguous. And so what that means is a boundary that is discontiguous would have a disconnected zone, kind of like you currently have at Goshen. Attempt to use existing boundaries, natural and man-made, and so major roads, creeks, railroad tracks, those types of things. Other things that we see, another guideline that I don't have up here is try to make a plan that lasts. A lot of districts don't want to be back and doing this again, and so having kind of that future thought might be another piece of that we want to consider. I also have up on this slide the dreaded triangle of boundary planning, and so it's important to realize that although we want to have some guidelines, that it's not going to be possible to adhere to all of them because some of them are just contradictory. If we want to balance utilization, balance demographics, and minimize travel time, that may not be possible, and we're really going to have to pick 2. Reason that we have that is because the students kind of are where they are, and the demographics are what they are. There's just some demographic realities that exist in any district or any geography. If you want to have completely balanced, diverse schools, you're going to have some boundaries that may look a little different. If we want to have students everybody is going to their geographically closest school, we may have some imbalance in utilization. We may have schools that are positioned in such a way that if every student was walkable to if every student that could walk to the school went to the school, it may be too many students for that school. And so those are just some things that we have to consider. Our next steps, we're working on our baseline enrollment projections. We'll be establishing the advisory committee. We'll determine what guidelines we want to use to evaluate the options as we go through it. And that's something that we can work through with the administration or the advisory committee. And we'll work on creating a project website. And this is just an example of a very simple one of what this could look like. It's just a homepage, and then we have different resources, schedule. I don't have the FAQ button on here, but we could have the FAQ button over here, and then any presentation material will be updated frequently on that site. So at that point, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any board members have questions for Mr. Leopold?
So what is the time frame that we're looking at?
We're looking at, let me get back here. We're looking at starting now, and we'd be wrapping up in February. And I think that the goal is we want to kind of have everything established so that as we start the enrollment process for next year, we've got some certainty there. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, first of all, Scott, I mean, you've done work for us before and you just do an excellent job. You're very thorough. Your presentations are fantastic. You've come with us with our enrollment study and visited other stakeholders and attended those meetings and have been able to just clearly educate our community about enrollment. So appreciate the opportunity to work with you again.
Mm-hmm.
And I do, I guess, maybe more of a comment. I think it is possible, even in a pandemic, to do public engagement. And I think that the way that you've outlined it makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's a successful strategy. So certainly to you, and then also to Mr. Barrett and Ms. Elliott. I mean, Mrs. Elliott, I certainly appreciate the effort that you're making to ensure that, number one, we are ensuring that the public process is thorough and that we're engaging the public in a meaningful way. But I also like the fact that you're incorporating and working with Scott to incorporate a website, a project website that people can go to with specific information. So that's really well done, and I appreciate that effort.
Any other questions for Mr. Leopold or comments about the cooperative strategies agreement? Sounded like someone was about to say something. No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Leopold. I know that was a lot of waiting before you were able to give your presentation to us, but thank you for being here with us tonight so that we could get some detail about how the process will look. I would echo Mrs. Chrysler's comments about the website, especially in times like this when we are doing so many things virtually. It's nice that there's a place that people will be able to see what's going on. So thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Scott.
All right. Take care, everybody.
We appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments from board members about any of the other items under general business? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Okay, we are on board reports and discussions. And it looks like I'm first as legislative liaison. I am not going to talk about everything that's going on in the legislature right now because it's lame duck season and there's a lot going on in the legislature right now. So I just picked out a couple things that I wanted to mention, and I will wait until December or January once lame duck is over before I talk in detail about anything else. So the few things that I just wanted to mention tonight. Number one is Senate Bill 89. We have not talked about that for a long time. That is the bill that deals with the Ed Choice voucher program. There was a bill that came out of the Senate, and then there was a separate bill from the House. They ended up sending it to a conference committee, which is made up of members from both the House and the Senate. Yesterday, the Senate voted to approve some changes made by the conference committee. And today, this afternoon, the House voted to accept those changes. I'll talk more in detail about this bill once it's signed, but the changes would alter eligibility criteria for the performance-based program and also increase from 200 to 250% from 200% the poverty threshold for the income-based expansion program. I want to wait to talk about the bill a little bit more in detail next month because one of the things that we talked about briefly in Finance Committee was the increase in the number of students that we have that are making the choice to leave the district and go to charter schools or private schools. And so it's really too late for us to weigh in on this legislation. We did have some community members way back, I don't remember when, sometime last year, I think. We had at least 4 community members go and offer testimony when this legislation was being discussed. But at this point, I'll talk a little bit, like I said, a little bit more in detail about this legislation next month or in January, but it is going to have a bigger impact on the district given the larger number of students and families that we have making the choice to leave. The second bill that I want to talk about, and I'm just going to mention it because nothing much is happening right now, but House Bill 305, Senate Bill 376, those are companion bills that are in the House and the Senate related to the CUP Patterson School Funding Plan. That plan was originally introduced in the legislature in June of 2019. Then Representative Cupp worked with Representative Patterson, I think over the course of 2 years with people from across the state, superintendents, state treasurers. A lot of work was done to build that plan. Then Representative Cupp is now Speaker Cupp in the House. And I think his goal was to try to get this plan put in place, this General Assembly. The funding piece is a separate component. They wanted to get the plan put in place so that the structure was in place, regardless of whether the funding was there to fund the plan. But it seems that, at least for right now, this week anyway, it's both in the Senate and in the House. It's still in committee, so it hasn't moved out. And the legislature is on Thanksgiving break next week, so it's unlikely that anything's going to happen in the next couple weeks at least. The last bill that I want to mention is House Bill 404. This is a bill that started out related to allowing college trustee boards to meet virtually. They ended up using this bill as a vehicle for extending some provisions related to COVID that were set to expire on December 1st. One of those provisions is related to the ability of all public bodies to continue meeting virtually. So it would allow all public bodies to continue meeting virtually until July 1st, 2021. This bill also extends from December 1st, 2020 to July 1st, 2021, the Director of Agriculture's temporary authority to exempt a school or entity from regulation as a food processing establishment under certain conditions. So that's a provision that is related to our ability to continue to feed students during break time. And then this bill also extends deadlines for several things related to evaluations, diagnostic assessments, health screenings, all school related things. All of this kind of got dumped into this bill. That bill passed with emergency language, so it takes effect immediately. It passed out of the Senate yesterday and then out of the House today. So it is just awaiting the governor's signature. I do want to make one comment about the provision related to allowing public bodies continue to meet virtually, knowing that the original legislation was set to expire December 1st. I talked with our technology director, Matt Blackwell, and our superintendent, Mr. Barrett. Matt had a plan in place for us to be able to transition into meeting in person should the legislation expire. As of right now, that contingency plan was put in place in the event that the legislation expired. There are some drawbacks to that plan. And I guess the reason that I want to address this is because I think the question has come up a number of times in our community. There's not a difficulty with the board itself coming together safely to have a meeting. We have the ability to set up a room in a way that keeps us 6 feet apart, and for us to wear face masks, and for us to meet in person. The difficulty comes in trying to maintain our ability to engage transparently and, I guess I'm going to use the same word, engaging way with our community, given the limits on the number of people that are allowed to gather together, and given the desire to make sure that people can continue to meet virtually. So one of the difficulties with us being all together in the same room is that, and allowing people to continue to watch us live stream, is that in order to do that, we would continue to be meeting, even though we're sitting together in the same room, we would continue to meet over Zoom so that we could allow people to be able to watch, not in person, but from their homes. In doing that, sound becomes difficult. If we all have, for example, our microphones on, there's tremendous feedback with that many microphones together in a room. We had kind of talked through some ways to do that, but I don't know. And eventually I think that we will get to a point where we are meeting together in person. But for now, because this legislation was extended, it is not my plan that we would transition into that right now. And if anyone has any questions about that, I'm happy to try to answer them. But it's really difficult, like I said, to set up a model where we are in person, but still allowing the community to participate virtually and have that work in a way that lets people engage in real time. So for now, it's my plan to stay in this model that we have. Anybody have any questions or comments about anything? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you said about Matt's resourcefulness. Matt, you did a great job coming up with a plan, figuring how to mic us up and to make it sound good, how to have visitors meet remotely in another room. That would have meant we would have had to staff that room so that the computer could be cleaned with alcohol wipes. It's a very complicated process, but Matt, just like you always do, you were very resourceful and very thoughtful, and you helped Burl and I kind of think through things. So thanks so much for that work. We won't be needing it yet, but maybe at some point. Thank you.
Thanks. We are going to go over to Mr. Campbell for a report from Eastland Fairfield, if he has one.
I do. Just a brief one. We met last evening. The first initial topic of discussion, or a lengthy one, was of course the rise of cases in Franklin County, and the report we received back from Franklin County from Joe was that the spread is not happening at the schools. It is happening in the community, but not in the schools. The schools are doing a good job. The guidance Eastland Fairfield received was to remain hybrid even if the county turns purple. right now, the administration's focus is to keep, work with the students and keep them in school as much as possible, because what we're running into as we get to December, we're running into end of course testing and certification time. And it's really important that that the students are in school, in the buildings for that. It's very difficult or impossible to take those end of course testing or certifications virtually. What they did decide was for full year classes, there are no mid-year semester exams this year, but they are for end of course testing, they do have that. The staff at Eastland Fairfield is doing an excellent job showing up, and we're having a very good rate of attendance as far as staff is concerned. Some of the concerns is students. Sometimes we miss a big chunk of students, and what we're seeing as far as the factors are concerned, the factors impacting that are if a school district decides to go full-time distance, sometimes getting the students to Eastland is a little difficult. Sometimes getting them a little bus to Eastland Fairfield is a little difficult. And also with Eastland Fairfield sitting, in two different counties, Fairfield and Franklin County, and they do different things. So it is a total balancing act. But as far as, the Eastland Fairfield focus at this point is the next 4 days, get them in school the next 4 days, and then figure out what we're going to do about December. So they're on top of it, but things moving along just like it is here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Campbell. Do we have any update from Gahanna Parks and Rec, Mr. Barrett?
They changed the meeting from Tuesday to Wednesday, and or was it Monday to Wednesday? And all they talked about was the budget. So I don't really have an in-depth report about that.
Okay, thank you. Any update from our local government liaison, Mrs. Mooring?
No report for that or GJVF.
Okay, thank you. Any report from Insurance Committee, Mr. Hairston?
I have no report at this time.
Okay. Any other items or comments from any board members?
So it's too late because I'm sure everybody's gone, but I just wanted to also mention that our task force includes a representation also not just in the medical and health fields, but also communications and legal. And so I didn't want to leave those two out. And so I apologize that I did earlier.
Thanks, Mrs. Chrysler. Anything else from board members? Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session pursuant to revised code 121.22G1 for the purpose of the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, compensation of an employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against an employee, official, licensee, or student, unless the employee, official, licensee, or student requests a public hearing?
I'll move.
Mrs. Chrysler, is there a second?
I'll second. Okay. Daphne.
Mr. Campbell, Mrs. Mooring, whichever one you heard first, Mr. Verlingo. I haven't explained this for a while, but when the board goes into executive session, we do have to come back into open public session to adjourn the meeting. But we do not have planned any other board action after executive session. So if you are out there watching the live stream, you are more than welcome to continue watching the screen that says that we're in executive session. And we will come back, but the only thing that we will be coming back to do is adjourn the meeting. Any other comments from other board members? Everybody should have a link already. I know Mrs. Elliott just asked me, but everybody should have a link to go into executive session. The only people who are needed in executive session right now are the board members and board counsel, Mrs. Danofsky. Is there anybody who doesn't have that link? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Okay. Ms. Moran,
Yes.
Ms. Piccolo Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston.
Yes.
Okay, so it is 8:39 p.m. Definitely anybody who's going into the separate virtual meeting room for executive session, you need to completely exit from the Zoom and go into the other link for the meeting. I don't know, Mrs. Elliott, does everybody else need to exit as well? I don't even know. No. Okay, so you're welcome to hang out in this Zoom and wait for us to come back to adjourn. I also think you don't have to do that. We can adjourn. Mr. Verlingo will be with us at the end of the meeting. So you all are more than welcome to jump out of the Zoom and go on about your business tonight. Thank you. I think we are all back. So it is 9:20 p.m. and we are out of executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Mrs. Chrysler, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hairston, any discussion? Okay, Mr. Oh,
I do think it's 9:20, just
what time did I say? I heard that.
9:28.
Oh, okay, it's 9:20. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Hairston? Mr. Hairston?
Yes.
Ms. Mooring? Ms. Piccolo-Antonio?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler?
Yes.
Okay.
It is 9:21 now and we are adjourned. Good night, everybody.
All right, thank you. Good night.
Thanks.